Jack Loeffler is an American oral historian, radio producer, writer, and environmentalist. He is known for his work documenting the culture and ecology of the American Southwest. He was Edward Abbey's best friend. I had the honor and privilege of interviewing him in his home in Durango, Colorado in December 2023. He was 87 years old at the time of this interview. This interview is comprised of 7 questions broken up into 11 parts into a single YouTube playlist. The full interview is also in the playlist, but will be released last. Jack is full of wisdom, and I did my best to let him speak freely without boundaries during our 3-hour conversation. Given this dynamic, Jack provided long, winding answers to my questions as he reflected back on his life. With that, let's get to the interview.
I always feel that the important thing is the work rather than the person who did it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I've always felt that way. No matter what you do, I mean, if you write a book, then your name's on the front of the book. But that's, we all knew each other a long time ago.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I first met Ed in 1962 in a bar in Santa Fe.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we didn't get it together until probably around 69 or 70.
Mm-hmm.
And then we realized that we were ahead, and really big time. I mean, what I think of is radical environmentalism. That's when that aspect of it
Mm-hmm.
happened. And for example, the way I got the coolest gig I've ever had, man, is Fire Lookout.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I did that for 3 seasons of 100 days and nights a year, just no tower, just camped on top of this rock.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I was able to get my pickup up there so I could sleep in it when lightning storms and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Because that's no fun to be up on top
Yeah,
of a
yeah.
rock.
Totally. With the human lightning rod.
Yeah. And is it true that 4 tires will keep you?
Yeah. Conductors and insulators.
But anyway, I came into Durango one day to get groceries, and there was a map store in town. And they sold maybe 4 or 5 books, and one of them was what this guy I'd drunk a couple of beers with back in 1962. And so I got the book, and it was Desert Solitaire.
Mm-hmm.
And I read the book and realized that this is somebody who understood what I understood
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
about the flow of nature and being out in it. And we got together right around the time we started the Black Mesa Defense Fund, which included Jimmy Hopper, Bill Brown, and Terry Moore. Terry joined us shortly after we founded it, and he snapped at what we were doing. And that came to be because Hopi Indians, well, Bill Brown, who's gone, Jesus, says Jimmy. Terry's still alive, but Bill Brown had worked as the Southwestern historian for the Park Service.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd gotten scuttlebutt about what was happening out on Black Mesa, which I'd gotten a taste of even as early as 64,
Mm-hmm.
thinking mines and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned that they were going to strip mine Black Mesa for coal, run a railroad is yet to be constructed from Black Mesa, the north end of Black Mesa, to the shores of Lake Powell, to construct the Navajo generating station, to provide electricity to power up the power plant that pumped to pump water from the Colorado River over into the Central Arizona project.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very complex, and I mean it took forever to understand it. But after Bill told me about this, and also about how water was to be pumped out of the Navajo aquifers, it's called, beneath Black Mesa, which serves both Navajos in the region and all of the Hopi Springs
Mm-hmm.
at the rate of 2,000 gallons a minute to be pumped in a slurry line over to Loeffler, Nevada,
Mm-hmm.
to a power plant, basically light up Las Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
etc. And that really bummed me out. I'd started another organization shortly before then, late '69 maybe, called the Central Clearinghouse. The idea was to have a place where stuff in the Southwest that looked like it was going to be environmentally problematic could feed information, and thus it would be dispersed as best we could.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through that that Bill and I learned about this stuff out on Black Mesa. And so we then founded the Black Mesa Defense Fund, and other people began to be the director of the Central Clearinghouse.
Mm-hmm.
Harvey Mudd had given us a grant to start the Central Clearinghouse, and he also let us use the rest of that grant for the Black Mesa Defense Fund, and he then funded the Central Clearinghouse again. And he became one of the directors, as did Brant Culkin, who later became a president of the Sierra Club, and it lasted a long time. It lasted longer than the Black Mesa Defense Fund did, but the Black Mesa Defense Fund it was very anarchistic
Mm-hmm.
in its approach. And I had learned this stuff, and I went out to the Hopis. I had a very good friend who was very old. We later discovered he'd been born in 1873, and this was 1970.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him about it because he was my best friend out at Hopi at that point. And he said, hang on and camp here tonight, which I did in Havila. And the next day, I went into a place in Shamopavi. In '63, I told them about the strip mining of Black Mesa, the hauling of the coal to build a power plant, and the sucking of water at the rate of 2,000 gallons a minute out of the aquifer that served their springs.
Mm-hmm.
And they freaked. And I thought, boy, this is beyond anything I thought was going to happen. And I wanted to go in. I thought they were going to take out the tribal council, frankly, but because the tribal council, unbeknownst to them, had signed an agreement with the Peabody Coal Company, St. Louis, East St. Louis, to do the strip mining. And the whole thing had been done by the person who'd been appointed their lawyer, John Boyden, who also worked for the Peabody Coal Company. And so the man spoke with a forked tongue. He was, this is a bad scene, man. And my friend Charles Wilkinson did a beautiful book called Fire on the Plateau that really gets into it as well as anybody did. But anyway, the Hopis came unglued. And after they settled down, they had to discuss all of this in Hopi, of course. Thomas Banyaka was the guy who was their sort of interpreter. But David Manonia, my friend, was the one who said, will you try to help us get this out before the American public? And I said, okay. And so that was the Black Mesa Defense Fund. And so I traveled all over the United States and did presentations. And really, I mean, in those days, I was advocating take it out any way you can, just don't hurt anybody.
Right.
And there's one chapter in this book where I talk about my thoughts with regard to the slurry line. I really wanted to blow it. And then ultimately I had breakfast with a guy who had been one of the designers of it.
Oh, wow.
This isn't in the book. And he said, if you'd have done it, that would have shut it down forever. And I thought, I should have done it.
Oh my gosh.
And Ed Abbey, at that time, was writing The Monkey Wrench Gang, much of which takes place in this same region. And we hooked up and realized that we were so much of a head, because I was about to start a novel called The Man Who Shot Machines.
Okay.
And Ed said, but I'm writing.
You gotta let me publish this book first.
and I, because he was a writer,
Mhm.
I didn't even think about being a writer. I wrote
Sure.
an occasional essay, but anyway, Ed and I spent a lot of time really doing research, etc. And that's how we became real pals, I must say. But anyway, about being, I don't know, who knows how much influence anybody's ever had about anything. I have no idea, to tell you the truth. I know that Dave Foreman heard about the Black Mesa Defense Fund, and he came and was a volunteer with us for a while. And then he founded Earth First. And other people did too. Other people came and volunteered with us because, I mean, those years, my annual income came out for me personally about $2,400 a year.
Oh my gosh.
And so I lived on poached venison, so to speak, and beans.
Yeah.
My wife and
A
I.
lot of pinto beans.
Yeah, a lot of pinto. As a matter of fact, I got
Yeah,
some.
I saw you soaking up.
But no, when nonprofit organizations, we sure were one of those.
Yeah.
Although we weren't a 501c3, we were just out there doing everything we possibly could.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time making public proclamations in different universities, talking to college people. But as much as anything, I was out there scheming
Yeah,
and
boots
trying
on
to
the
figure
ground.
out. And it took forever. And concurrently, my last boss was Lee Udall, who was the wife of former Secretary of the Interior Stuart Udall, under whose watch all of that stuff sort of came together. And he, being a native son of Arizona, I interviewed Stuart about this several times. We talked about, Stuart became a dear friend, actually. The whole family did. Stuart and Lee were like family to me. And they moved to Santa Fe. And we were just hanging out all the time. And at one point I said to Stuart, I've got to try to stop the Black Mesa scene, because it's really going to screw up those indigenous peoples out there beyond belief, plus screw up a huge landform that's sacred to these Native American people, plus result in the largest ever coal-fired power plant, which is going to contribute to this totally screwing up the atmosphere of the Southwest, which is going to be one of a bunch of more coal-fired power plant. I had watched the construction of the Four Corners power plant. That was the first one, first big one in the Southwest. And when I went on the line in 1963, which I was here for that, that also contributed big time to my responding to the needs of habitat for human intervention as best we could. And I mean, there's this whole array of things, but the Black Mesa Defense Fund we did our best, and we couldn't do it because we'd taken on the United States government and the state of Arizona and the Peabody Coal Company, and if we'd known the magnitude, we would have done it anyway.
Right.
Because that's what you do.
I want to, this isn't a question here, so you don't have to, yeah, I mean, you can just speak to it however you want, or say skip it. So you're talking about your relationship with the Udall family, who it sounds like they were for this project.
Well, Stuart was very much. I mean, he was.
But you still had, I feel like in today's political landscape, like you're not allowed to be friends with someone who has who's on the other side of the aisle. But hearing from you, it sounds like you kind of were, and that was okay.
We remained friends. I mean, I met Stuart. He was still Secretary of the Interior when I met him. And because Lee flew me back to McLean for the gig I was doing, which had to do with designing and traveling exhibition to convey Navajo history from the Navajo point of view, not the Anglo point of view, to Navajos So I visited all 63 of the BIA schools that then existed on the Navajo reservation, telling them that Anglo history is wrong.
Oh, right.
And Stuart, 2 days before he died, his caregiver called and said, "Stuart wants you to come over." And I did, and there he was in his deathbed. And we had a nice, good time. But he said, "You know, Jack, you were right. The Central Arizona Project was a mistake."
Huh.
And talk about profound.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm giving you one of the radio programs. Well, I'm giving you a bunch of radio programs, but there are two that I would really appreciate if you did listen to.
Okay.
Because one is a program that is part of one called Moving Waters, the Colorado River and the West that I produced around 2000 or 2001.
Okay.
And I got really into it. I mean, I always get deeply into whatever I'm getting into.
Sure.
And Stuart helped me enormously with that radio series. He used in and out of it all over the place. But there's one program in there called Clashes and Contentions, which really gets into an awful lot of the genesis of the whole scene, Glen Canyon Dam. I interviewed Floyd Dominey, who was the commissioner of Bureau of Rec during those days, and who was my arch enemy back in those days. And he certainly knew who I was. So I guess I must have had some sort of
Right. But at that point.
But I got back there and I interviewed him, and we ended up becoming friends.
So do you think that would, again, I keep hearing this, and it just seems your dynamic with the people you're interviewing, whether these indigenous people or people who who are supporting industrial projects that are going to hurt the environment, hurt the culture, hurt the people living on the land, and yet you maintain a friendship with them, or you build a friendship with them. They give you an interview. Not only do they give you an interview, and then through the interview, you kind of become.
Well, at the end of the one with Floyd,
yeah.
I mean, we looked at each other and we realized we'd been at totally opposite ends of the spectrum with regard to that whole scene, the dams on the Colorado River.
Right.
And at the end of it, we laughed because we realized that we were both men of particularly strong opinion, and there's no sense in not having a strong opinion. If you have one, if it isn't strong, forget it.
So yeah, but over and over again, the theme here is you're able to find one or two positive attributes with someone who has ideas or projects they've worked on that you disagree with, and use those positive attributes to form a foundation for friendship.
Well, it's basically we're fellow humans.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize our humanity in each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot nicer to make friends than enemies. I've made a fair number of them, believe me, back in the day.
Sure.
I never hurt anybody, though. That was my law to myself, was never hurt a fellow human, no matter what I was getting into.
Right.
But
fascinating. Well, thank you for speaking deeper to that, and just giving me a lot more history on your in the Black Mesa Defense Fund.
Well, that was a big one for me. And at the end of it, when we closed the doors, I hated it, but I knew that there was no way we could win because billions of dollars have become involved at this point, and at $2,400 a year, you don't have much of a chance.
Yeah. Find a big machine. All right. Let's see, question 6.
Oh, the other program I'd like you to listen to features Gary Snyder and Dave Foreman.
Oh, that'd be really cool to listen to.